This is our main character, Haruka. He's also known as the lonesome king of another world these days. Just like last night, this unlucky guy, having nothing to eat, ended up stealing a roasted pig from some goblins. Poor little guys, they hunted that pig all evening. They were roasting it and celebrating when this jerk showed up. With their stupid instincts, the whole goblin pack got tricked by him. Tricked into chasing him like dogs and falling into a pit to their deaths. That punk, after taking out those monsters, is now all happy about being on his way to conquering this other world, all by himself. A few days before, when everything was still normal at Haruka's school, this guy had been lonely since he was a kid, so he wasn't close to anyone. Plus, he didn't want anything to do with his classmates, which is why he's called the Lonesome King. Now, his class is divided into all sorts of different cliques, fake intellectuals, all brawn no brains types. There are plenty of girls, and even some otakus. Somehow, he's the only one in the class who just likes to read and doesn't bother anyone. Right when he was feeling totally bored with life, the transfer incident happened. Figuring something was up, Haruka immediately scrambled to get out and escape by himself. But life isn't a dream. That power slowly pulled him in, bringing him to another dimension. Because he jumped the gun, he ended up being left all alone, while his classmates had already been transported to who knows when. Haruka thought that in moments like these, a king or princess would appear, or maybe a genie. You wish! Surprise, it's this old man. And he's even more panicked than Haruka. After hearing the explanation, he learns that his classmates are all safe. He himself is the chosen one, but chosen to stay behind because there aren't any special skills left for him. The old man even showed Haruka the remaining skills, and they were totally useless. In this summoning, there were supposed to be only 43 people, and Haruka was number 44, so his luck was kind of bad. Looking at what was left, he didn't even want to choose, knowing that even if he did, he'd be a total weakling. He started chewing out the geezer, saying, "How am I supposed to survive like this?" After getting so much flack, the old man just shoved all the remaining skills into Haruka and pushed him down to the other world. He was just too tired of dealing with him. The next second, he was in a strange new place. He thought it was a dream, but it turned out to be real. Good thing he didn't cuss out the old man too much. If he'd gotten mad, he might have logged him out permanently. Among Haruka's skills was something called an infinite bag, which turned him into a real-deal villager character. He looked kind of goofy, but this guy was pretty awesome. After checking his stats, the system asked him to roll the dice for good luck. That was one of the skills he'd gotten. Haruka tried it out, and somehow both dice showed the letter Monsieur. He wondered if M stood for minus, like a negative number. If his stats went negative, that would really suck. But did he get bonus points? Haruka didn't know what to choose, so he maxed out his luck stat. And that M wasn't for minus, it was for map. Everything else was at level 1, just as he expected. Plus he had 2 extra lame titles that he didn't know what to do with. He also wondered why there was no one around, since his classmates were summoned too. There should at least be some sign of them. Brushing that aside, he started his new journey here, but still didn't know what to do next. His starting job was a villager, so he figured he'd find a place to build a house and live a happy life. After walking around all day and finding nothing, Haruka used an item from his infinite bag. When worn on his eyes, it let him appraise everything. Not too bad, except it stopped working when he took it off. He was excited to learn about new plants, like he'd just been enlightened. Immediately, Haruka gathered the things he needed, without worrying about running out of space. He found a water source right after, securing his survival. Continuing to explore, Haruka discovered a nice-looking cave and curiously went inside, even asking permission from the owner to enter. That was bold. Good thing there were no monsters inside, or he would have been toast. Turns out, luck was a pretty big advantage. With the supplies he had, Haruka quickly settled down there since it was getting dark. So the first day of this honest farmer went by without encountering anything. This was partly thanks to a lamp that repelled monsters, plus his title, Protector of the Home, so no monsters dared to come near. His breakfast was pretty simple, dried meat and mushrooms from his infinite bag. Since he'd lived alone for a long time, cooking was no big deal. This was kind of fun, actually. No need to compete with the world. After eating, he continued exploring the surrounding area, looking for a stable food supply. There were plenty of medicinal plants, but not much meat. Suddenly, he spotted some goblins also looking for food, and got a little scared. These guys were pretty dumb and kind of clueless. They got stung by bees, but didn't know how to run away. Seeing that, he suddenly felt a lot more confident, figuring he'd have to fight sooner or later. And this was a good opportunity, since there were only 2 of them. If they came in a whole pack, he'd be screwed. His current weapon was just a simple stick, so Haruka was still hesitant. Remembering he had some other crappy skills, he imbued the wooden stick with a bit of magic to make it stronger. After feeling more confident, he decided not to rely on any overpowered moves and would work his way up with his own strength. Quickly charging in, he surprised one goblin, knocking it flat on its face. Not stopping there, this jerk kept hitting the same spot, killing the goblin dead. Its buddy was stupid, just watching Haruka beat the other one to death before charging in to attack. It ended up getting blown away by some of his skills. After finishing them off, it was already afternoon. Like a habit, he went to get water for dinner, feeling very satisfied. Though his first battle had its flaws, he figured he'd improve gradually. A villager's stamina was pretty decent, but more importantly, his spirits were a little low because he hadn't had any meat. Back in the cave, he roasted some mushrooms that had a stamina recovery stack for a quick snack. He also looted a wooden club from the unlucky goblin. It was pretty hard to use since it was heavy and short. His stats had increased a bit because he reached level 2. Most importantly, his combat skills had improved, even though he'd only taken down 2 monsters. There were some other useless things too, not worth mentioning. By the 3rd day, life in this other world started getting rough. 3 days of eating nothing but mushrooms had him sick of it. He thought if he complained about wanting better food, his class president would scold him, since she believed, "Luxury is bad, be content with what you have." Cheering himself up, Haruka decided to practice those awesome skills he'd gotten yesterday. After coating his body with magic, Haruka was pretty amused. Who would have thought that the cling wrap used by housewives in his old world would be useful here? His appraisal skill was also level 2 now, but he didn't know what was different about it. It wasn't clear if this guy's brain was fried after 3 days of eating mushrooms. Just outside the cave, he suddenly found a mushroom and got excited, like he'd struck gold. After a few seconds of happiness, Haruka realized the problem and kicked the mushroom away because his bag was full of them. Turns out, he really was mushroom-brained. He even wished for meat to grow from trees or bushes, which was even crazier. Back to magic training, he seriously coated his entire body with it. Thanks to that, his movement and everything became lighter. This villager was jumping dozens of meters at a time, and his speed was insane because farmers are good runners. It felt like teleportation, and Haruka was thrilled. Keeping up the momentum, he immediately attacked 2 goblins bigger than the ones from the day before. "Take that, you punk!" Seeing that these guys were big but not smart, he thought about finding a few more to fight. But after spotting 3 more nearby, he freaked out and took back his earlier words, running away because those monsters were too strong. Back home, he looked for ways to study the magic within him. Whenever he had free time, he'd go beat up goblins for fun to level up quickly. Things were going pretty well, and he even crafted a few items. By the 5th day, Haruka could take down those monsters in a single hit. The interior of his cave was also spruced up, looking like a decent place. That night, luck was on his side when he spotted a rabbit. He chased after it. The rabbit ran like crazy, but Haruka wasn't letting go. With his speed, he quickly caught it. He was thinking about what delicious meal to make when he suddenly got a warning. This isn't a goblin's energy signature. So, he went to check it out. Surprise! It was one of his classmates. These guys were part of the rogue gang, so Haruka didn't want to mess with them. Haruka covered the rabbit's mouth and prepared to leave. Thinking there might be more people around, he used his farsight skill to check, and he was right. But it was a group of troublesome girls nearby. The muscleheads were also searching all over the place. It seemed like the whole class was heading in the same direction, but none of them were people he wanted to hang out with. The only one he cared about was the class president. Seeing that she was okay, he happily let the rabbit go. She was understanding, so she would definitely be able to help him with a lot of things. He was about to head towards her when his Lonesome King title reminded him, this free and solitary life is the true path. Although it was a bit tough, ultimately, it was good to be carefree like this, a test of his own abilities. He then set a goal to conquer this world in his own way. Haruka decided he wouldn't bother meeting up with his classmates, and would just let them be. Coincidentally, the biggest jerks in the class showed up. Sensing him, they immediately split up to search. Haruka thought he'd be discovered, but surprisingly, the rabbit he'd caught earlier saved him. After confirming the noise was caused by the animal, the delinquents left. He didn't want to get involved, but their behavior was pretty strange, so he decided to follow them and investigate. These young guys, after coming to this world, seemed to be more liberated, even talking about the vice president having huge racks. Having those milk jugs to drink from in another world would be amazing. Haruka got bored listening to their pointless chatter about girls, wondering, "Don't you have any useful information?" This group continued talking about how the pretty girls in class had amazing racks, and Haruka was afraid that they might be targeting his pure class president. That girl had been leading these delinquents since their first year. She was super capable, so Haruka often called her Super Class President. Among the boys in the group, there was one guy who was more timid than the rest, named Tanaka. This guy was asked about his skills, and if he had his eye on any girls yet. This guy was probably the smartest in the class, making Google look like a newbie because he could answer any question. After bragging for a bit, they suddenly wanted to head back, thinking maybe the class vice president was waiting for them. After eavesdropping, Haruka guessed that the rest of his friends were upstream. Too far, he figured, might as well let them be. He returned to his cave, enjoying his solitary life. Unfortunately, he still hadn't had any meat today. Grilled mushrooms were tasty, but if he kept this up, he might become malnourished. He noticed his loneliness skill had even leveled up to 2. Seriously. Probably because he'd walked away and hadn't bothered meeting up with his friends. Those titles would make other people cringe. Plus, he was only level 3 despite taking down a lot of monsters. Part of the reason was his skill. Jack of all trades, master of none, which basically meant even if he did 100 things, the result was still 0. Plus, he had another one called Scarecrow. It was a combo that totally destroyed any chance of advancement. Haruka wasn't sure what benefit this would give him. His only advantage was having a bunch of ridiculously funny skills. In one night, he'd created a fantastic stone room for himself. Just as he finished, his mushrooms were cooked. Haruka had to settle for those, since he had nothing else. On the 7th day, at the crack of dawn, he suddenly heard the clashing of weapons and cursed under his breath. Who the hell is fighting at this hour? He thought it was the delinquents, but it was the otakus getting ganged up on by goblins. Haruka found the scene hilarious, thinking they were even more useless than him. He thought about helping but then stopped. He used appraisal and realized they were actually really strong, almost level 20. The weird thing was, they couldn't handle these little goblins that he could kill with one hit. Unlike Haruka, these guys were the chosen ones, with super powerful skills. I figured the only problem was they probably hadn't mastered their skills yet. At this point, Haruka realized he didn't need to intervene, because his class was full of national-level athletes. Top students and popular girls were all gathered here. He wondered how a nobody like him had stumbled into this paradise. Not to mention, the otakus were the ones who knew the most about other worlds, so there was nothing to worry about. He was about to head back when he suddenly sensed a murderous aura from 2 other monsters stealthily approaching. The otakus realized they were being ambushed from behind. These guys had talked to Haruka a few times before. Well, might as well help them out. With his crappy skills, he still used his magically reinforced stick to whack those monsters dead. Just then, his friends over there finished up too. Seeing Haruka there, they were pretty surprised, and he invited them back to his place to rest. Generally, these guys were easy to talk to. They weren't bad guys either, thanking him for helping them. Since it had been a while since he'd talked to anyone, he didn't really know what to say to sound cool. Inside his awesome house, the otaku's eyes lit up. This cave was seriously stylish. Haruka explained that he'd used earth magic and the wrapping skill to make it so nice. After expanding the room, there was enough space for 10 people. Since he was living alone, his friends thought it was a bit of a waste. He asked where the others were, and learned that they had split up, going off on their own instead of staying together. The story went back to when they were first transported. Initially, everyone panicked, surprised that the old man had actually brought them here. The well-behaved girls were crying like crazy. Some wanted to go home, some wanted their moms, and some even wanted to take off all their clothes. Basically, most of them knew nothing about other worlds, except for the otaku group. Because they played a lot of games and watched a lot of anime, they knew a lot about this stuff. Seeing that, the delinquents immediately demanded they spill all the information or get beaten up. The class president seemed to be the calmest of the bunch, advising everyone to be quiet because making noise in the forest would attract attention. As soon as she finished speaking, a whole pack of goblins showed up, targeting them. The class president freaked out, not knowing what to do. Seeing the monsters, the girls cried even harder. Somehow, the delinquents were even more scared. To save their friends, the 4 otaku boys used their knowledge, pulling out equipment to fight. Everyone knew goblins were weak monsters, so they were pretty confident. Seeing how they fought, the more reckless than brainy group got fired up, determined to defeat the goblins. And they succeeded. The class president suggested going somewhere higher and more open for safety, because it was too scary there. So, they all went to a clearing. It looked pretty safe, so they decided to settle there. Everyone split up, helping each other set up tents, and with the otakus' knowledge, things became easier. The class president also assigned everyone suitable tasks. The class started to become more united. Or maybe not, because right after that, the bad girls revolted. They didn't like this manual labor stuff, they just wanted to slack off. The class president tried to reason with them, but it didn't work. This led to the group's downfall, as everyone started thinking only of themselves. Worst of all, they forced the otaku group to do everything. As a result, the class system collapsed. Even so, the class president and the other hardworking students kept trying. Exploited both physically and mentally, the 4 otakus still had to comply. The reason was they knew some classmates had received charm and mind control skills. If they didn't level up and become stronger, they'd never be free. Currently, the delinquents were dangerous, so the otakus followed them and discovered their plan to build a harem in this other world. This wasn't impossible, as they all had high combat power. Worried about the girls, the otakus ran back to inform the class president. She didn't want their evil plans to succeed, so she got fired up and started grinding levels to become stronger, before becoming prey for those bad guys. Just then, the delinquents leveled up, gaining access to skills called Charm and Scarecrow to carry out their scheme. Right after that, the class president showed up, like a lamb walking into a wolf's den. Too bad for them, she was super strong and knocked them all unconscious. Thanks to the otakus, they successfully sealed their 2 nasty skills. With their plan exposed, everyone kicked the 4 delinquents out, labeling them enemies of women. You'd think it would end there, but no. Those stubborn jerks hadn't given up on their dream of hooking up with the girls in their class, so they attacked and destroyed everyone's stuff. As a result, all their belongings were burned. All the blame was then placed on the poor otakus, especially with the useless girls who just sat around doing nothing, combined with the dissent from the useless boys. The otakus couldn't take it anymore and left. After hearing this story, Haruka suddenly felt sorry for them. Maybe they had it worse than him eating mushrooms for 7 days straight. To feed the 4 otakus, Haruka pulled out a whole 100 pounds of mushrooms for a feast. After partying until morning, he saw them off instead of going with them. They were otakus, so they wanted to explore this new life. Staying in a cave forever would be boring. They were pretty bummed that this idiot preferred living alone and wouldn't join them. They said they'd follow Haruka's path and become adventurers. If he ever ran into trouble, he could look them up. After that, Haruka waved them goodbye, since he just wanted to conquer the world by himself. Knowing the class president's group was having a tough time, Haruka went looking for them to help if needed. He happened to run into a monster, so he fought it. He got bitten pretty badly, but he still took it down. He traveled until nightfall before reaching their location, but all that remained was a scene of devastation. So, he used his tracking skill and discovered many footprints heading towards the other side of the stream. After following them, he ran right into those stuck-up, troublesome girls. Haruka was more scared of seeing them than seeing a ghost. So he ran away, making those 3 girls chase after him until they were almost dead tired. The leader begged Haruka to stop, knowing he was friends with the otakus. It turned out they were trying to find the otaku group. He wasn't sure what these girls were up to, so he didn't tell them where the otakus went, afraid his 4 friends would be forced back into servitude. But that wasn't the case. After they left, everyone realized their mistakes, wanting to make amends and apologize. They said if it weren't for the otakus, they wouldn't have survived this long. Seeing how serious they were, Haruka told them the otakus were gone. Besides, they didn't even know how to get out of the forest. So how could they chase after them? Plus, with monsters everywhere, their chances of surviving a day were slim to none. Haruka scolded the 3 girls, making them cry. After being pushed into danger, the fairer sex tends to look for someone to rely on. Currently, there was only Haruka here. so they asked him to teach them survival skills and other knowledge as a way to atone for their mistakes. Suddenly, Haruka's status screen appeared, showing the command skill and the names of the 3 girls, meaning he could completely control them. He didn't know why this skill activated, but whatever. As a result, the 3 girls followed Haruka to fight monsters and wanted to offer him everything. This guy wasn't into bad girls, so he didn't touch them. He was thinking about getting chewed out by the class president when she suddenly showed up. Recognizing Haruka, she called out to him, but his mind was elsewhere, and it took him a while to hear her. As for the delinquents, they hadn't given up on their girl hunting plans, wanting to deal with anyone in their way before building their harem. Haruka was surprised to see all the girls in his class with her. Even though they'd known each other since elementary school, Haruka still called her class president, which annoyed her. He apologized after getting scolded, and was then asked about the troublesome girls behind him. They looked like they were being controlled, which of course they were. Seeing him not say anything, she suspected Haruka had done something bad to them. He didn't know how to explain. Should he say they'd begged him to help? Luckily, the class president was still calm enough to listen to his explanation, seeing he wasn't a bad guy. After learning he'd used the command skill, her friends scolded him, saying he should only use that on monsters. I didn't know. It activated itself when they begged me. Suddenly, the other girls looked at him with disdain, thinking he probably wanted to build a harem like the other guys. To avoid further misunderstanding, Haruka tried to leave by himself, but was called back by the girls. He was the only guy here, so they wanted to rely on him. The class president then woke up her 3 friends. Everyone crowded around, asking the victims if they were okay. Still not trusting Haruka, he didn't really care, after all. His life had always been this lonely. Having some free time, he tried to play around with magic, but it backfired, burying him underground. His friend could only shake her head at his antics, but she still rescued him, reminding him, "You're not a cat. Stop messing around with everything." After hearing the troublesome girls explain the situation, they stopped being suspicious. Knowing that Haruka had saved both the otakus and the 3 girls, they praised him. Suddenly being thanked by everyone, he didn't know what to say, so he asked to go home. But the girls stopped him, asking for his help. The class president didn't understand what he meant, so he explained that he had a house in this other world. Hearing that, everyone got excited, wanting to visit. Before he could agree, he had them gather and follow him. When asked how many people his house could hold, he said around 240. If he cleared out the furniture and stuff, it could hold even more. There was also a kitchen, a bathroom, and even a toilet. Basically, everything from his old world had been recreated here. Hearing this, the girls freaked out because it had been a long time since they'd had a proper bath. His childhood friend was shocked to see him living in a mansion, while she and everyone else had to live like it was the Stone Age. The other girls urged the class president to ask if they could stay for a few days. She was actually pretty embarrassed to stay in the same house with a guy, but if it was Haruka, it shouldn't be a problem. So she wanted everyone to spend the night with him. He imagined being surrounded by all the pretty girls in his class, and was thrilled. So, he agreed. Thanks to his navigation skill, traveling at night was pretty easy. So, everyone formed a line, following Haruka back to his base. At first, everyone was a little scared, but once inside, they felt a bit better. Since it was a newly upgraded house, everything was amazing. The living room alone could hold 100 people, no joke. Everyone split up to explore, thinking it was all a dream. Having a place like this in the middle of a forest was incredible. Seeing their reactions, even stronger than the otakus before, Haruka was pretty happy. The girls were just excited about taking a bath. As soon as they saw the bathtub, they started taking their clothes off. They didn't even care that Haruka was there. The class president, seeing this embarrassing scene, told everyone to be more mindful. It wasn't their fault. Living in the forest had made them a bit wild. They just wanted to jump into the clean water. Haruka, still sticking to his solitary lifestyle, returned to his little hut to sleep. This made his friend a little worried. He was the owner, but gave up his space for everyone. She was very grateful. If it weren't for Haruka, they'd still be suffering outside. Apparently, after the otakus left, the boys disappeared too. The girls didn't know who to rely on, so they just tried to get by. It wasn't until they reached this house that they finally calmed down. Moreover, after taking a nice bath and eating Haruka's delicious food, everyone was happier. She blamed herself for being the class president, but not being able to help. He thought differently. knowing she had done a great job, leading and protecting everyone. Haruka reassured her. Don't compare yourself to others, just be confident. It's natural for the otakus to be better at this, they know about these worlds. Hearing these words, she was very touched and felt much better. He had to admit, Haruka was pretty amazing, able to live here alone and even build his own place. As for the girls, they were now sleeping peacefully, 4 to a bed, quite comfortably. That punk outside was having impure thoughts about them, unable to sleep. The next morning, he was suddenly woken up by a girl with purple hair. Breakfast had been prepared by the girls, and they wanted to invite him. Haruka was still half asleep when she crawled into his hut, which woke him right up. This girl knew Haruka was kinder than anyone here, so she wanted to get a little closer to him. Being pinned down like this, he tried to change the subject. He asked what was for breakfast, and was surprised to hear it was grilled fish. He ended up headbutting her accidentally, their first intimate moment. Haruka didn't care, running out to try it since he'd been eating vegetarian until now. Having grilled fish was enough to make him cry tears of joy. The class president was confused. There were rivers and streams everywhere. Why hadn't they caught any fish before? Haruka explained that he wanted to, but they were too slippery, and he wasn't good at catching fish with his bare hands, which was why he'd been eating only plants. He asked how they caught them, and was shown. Using everyone's abilities, they could generate electricity to stun the fish. Then, they just went down and picked the good ones to eat. Haruka, seeing this, begged her to do it again. Then, he used his wrapping skill to mess around with her magic. Amazingly, Haruka managed to wrap a ball of lightning. After dropping it into the water, it had the same effect as when it was shot out, which thrilled him. From now on, he wouldn't have to be a vegetarian anymore. He also learned lightning magic. How awesome! The class president didn't understand, asking how he was so skilled. Haruka explained that the wrapping skill, besides wrapping things, also lets the user acquire the attribute of what's inside. It seems useless, but it's actually really helpful in many situations. The girls thought he was hacking the game. No one learned magic that easily. Haruka modestly said he only had crappy skills, since they'd already taken all the good ones. Sitting there chatting, he asked if they had decided what to do, since they couldn't live here forever like him. It turned out they were aiming for the city. The troublesome girls were also looking for the otakus to apologize, so they were basically on the same path. To get through the forest, they needed to level up. Hearing that, Haruka agreed that this was necessary to protect themselves and their teammates. Knowing they weren't good at fighting, he agreed to train them for a few days. A bit later, everyone gathered, and Haruka asked them to check their stats and levels. Almost everyone was level 20, but they didn't know how to use their skills. Haruka, the lowest level there, was shocked, wondering why a level 7 was teaching them. At least he had combat experience, so he started the training session. Luckily, there were some monsters nearby, so he used his command skill to make the girls fight. These 3 were pretty weak, so there was no risk of injury. The cocky girls, seeing Haruka underestimate them, wanted to show off. They thought they were strong, but they got taken down in seconds. If these girls went into a real fight, they'd be dead. It made sense. Girls were physically weaker, even with skills, if they couldn't use them. They were no different from ordinary people. They started making excuses, leaving Haruka speechless, not knowing how to train them. Everyone was so afraid of pain and hardship, it was frustrating. After discussing strategy, the troublesome girls went out to fight again. Only the shy girl who woke Haruka up that morning didn't want to fight, apologizing for testing him earlier to see if he was like the boys who had attacked her. She was traumatized by that experience, and extremely worried. Hearing this, he realized the girls had suffered a lot too. Purple Hair was happy to be able to stay, eat, and even learn how to fight. She promised that if she caught a big fish tomorrow, she'd give it to him first. He was happy and nicknamed her Fishy. The next morning, true to her word, she brought him food. The others were still upset about not being able to beat the monsters yesterday, getting beaten up badly, so they wanted revenge today. The class president encouraged everyone, saying only hard work would lead to success. That being said, when they went to fight the monsters later, they all got knocked out. Even so, no one gave up, getting better each day. Seeing those monsters taunt them, the girls became even more determined. Then they looked at the others and were totally disgusted. Some were sleeping, some were pretending to be sick to skip out. As for the troublesome girls, wanting to apologize to the otakus quickly, they managed to defeat the monsters with the help of some other girls. Seeing that, the class president congratulated them. Initially, Haruka was worried, but this was a good start. Thanks to the monster's help, everyone improved. So they didn't kill them, treating them like friends instead. After this, Haruka thought he'd return to his solitary life. The class president thanked him again. Now they could finally head to the city. Suddenly, he realized she also wanted him to come along, which surprised him. Now that they had everything they needed, the girls started preparing to leave. Fishy had become quite close to Haruka and wanted to stay with him. Haruka, not knowing what would happen next, reminded his childhood friend to be careful. Worried about the girls' safety, he still escorted them out of the forest. If the delinquents were still planning on building their harem in this other world, they would definitely attack the group. Then, they were stopped by a giant pig. It even used weapons, forcing Haruka to step in. He wanted to use this opportunity to teach the girls how to defeat large creatures. The class president was worried, telling him to be careful, since the girls had no one else to rely on. Even though he'd never fought this type of monster before, he confidently charged into close combat. Luckily, the orc was pretty slow, and its attacks were simple, making them easy to dodge. Haruka hid behind it, planning to take down this big monster with magic for maximum efficiency. He had already copied a few spells from the girls, so he was choosing which one to use. The strongest ones were probably the 4 major elemental spells, above level 3. He was able to have so many different types thanks to his rapping skill. Before he could decide, the pig attacked again. Haruka didn't have time to cast a spell, so he took his wooden stick and whacked it dead. He didn't think it would be that effective, but one hit and it was logged out. That was unexpected. He was able to do this because he was just too strong, leaving the girls stunned for a moment. They seemed to doubt his decision to use magic earlier. Feeling embarrassed, he used fire magic to attack. Just one little toss, and the monster was down. The girls were hoping to learn how to fight, but with him one-shotting the monster like that, how could they learn anything? Haruka had surpassed his classmates and was on a completely different level of power. Scolded by the class president, he could only laugh it off. At night, thanks to his protection, the girls relaxed and enjoyed their meal, while the lonely guy went off to design some simple pit traps, just in case they were attacked while sleeping. He used a type that repelled monsters and activated a sensor if anyone approached. He also carefully planned the next day's route. His appraisal skill, after leveling up, now let him see the map. Turns out, this villager class wasn't as bad as he thought. Suddenly, he sensed something and went to check it out. Initially, he thought it was the delinquents, but it was the muscleheads. They didn't dislike Haruka, so they chatted casually. And this scene was witnessed by the class president from afar. Haruka wondered where these 4 were going, then thought about how they were tailing the girls and laughed at them. Offended, they told him they were here to find him. When asked why, they said they couldn't trust anyone anymore, which was understandable. After being attacked by the delinquents, they learned there were other dangerous skills similar to charm and enchantment. If you got hit by those, you'd be a slave forever. According to Haruka's memory, there was a skill called plunder. Just like the name suggested, it could steal anything. If someone had the intention of stealing enchantment and reusing it, then everyone would be screwed. That was why they separated from the girls, because apparently, one of them had this dangerous skill, not the delinquents. Haruka said he didn't have plunder, but he did have S-rank passive. Hearing that, they thought it was no different from charm or enchantment. Luckily, this was Haruka, so they trusted him, knowing he'd choose a solitary life, not getting involved with anyone. These guys were the ones who truly understood him. After that, they excused themselves to continue following the delinquents. They came here just to warn him, also asking him to take care of the class president and the other girls. The next morning, the girls were excited to finally leave the forest. The class president came to talk, having overheard the conversation last night. He also relayed their apologies to her for leaving. She then became shy, unable to speak. Seeing that, Haruka understood, asking, "You have the plunder skill, don't you?" She was shocked, but he already knew. Those muscleheads were just dumb. He'd figured it out a while ago. She wondered why he helped despite knowing. Wasn't he afraid she'd steal his skills? In reality, she could even take someone's life, let alone some basic skills. If she revealed this, many would be afraid, so she kept it a secret. Haruka knew the otakus knew this before him, but they weren't afraid, so why should he be afraid of the kindest person in class? Besides, the otakus trusted the class president, so they didn't seal her skill. Hearing this, she started crying and blaming herself. He felt awkward and ran away. Such a young fool, letting such a good opportunity slip by. Around noon, Haruka was selling drinks when the troublesome girls offered to trade their bodies for them. He was about to agree when the class president stopped him, which upset them. After setting off, he saw that at this rate, they would have to camp for the night, so he chose a quiet riverbank. Before letting the girls go there, he made an excuse about scouting ahead and came up with a plan, which made the class president suspicious. Recently, Haruka had started learning how to move like a superhero, using gravity magic to lighten his body and then wrapping it with magic power, enhancing everything. Thanks to this, he could almost fly. And the scenery was stunning. After a while, when he was completely out of energy, he slowly fell. Luckily, he didn't die. If he hadn't wrapped his body, he would have been reincarnated. By evening, he returned with injuries, worrying everyone. If scouting is like this, maybe you shouldn't do it next time. What if you fall to your death? What are we supposed to do then? To distract her, he brought out some fruits as gifts. Unexpectedly, that crazy girl from that morning latched onto him again. The next day, Haruka had to deal with a lot. How do you guys even manage to get lost? He was chased like a dog by a whole pack of orcs, then came back to find them splashing around in the water, speechless. Finally, after overcoming many difficulties, they made it out of the forest. Everyone was happy, but they couldn't let their guard down. After his near-death experience falling from the sky, God took pity on him and granted him the skywalk skill. So, he walked in the sky like it was nothing. With his expanded vision, everything around him seemed normal. Or maybe not, because in the distance, a few people were surrounded by monsters. He told the class president, and she wanted to go save them. She's so naive. Just because they're being attacked by monsters doesn't mean they're good people. He explained to them that even if they ran there, they wouldn't make it in time. And what if they helped them only to get robbed in return? As the only guy here, he took on the difficult task. The class president saw his point, saying, "If they're bad people, we'll fight back. But seeing how scared you are, I don't know if you can do it." Even so, seeing her determination, he felt a bit happier, saying he'd handle it. To get there quickly, Haruka went all out, combining those dangerous skills from yesterday again. The only difference was he removed his body weight entirely and created wind to run in the sky faster. It was like strapping rockets to his feet. He was enjoying himself when he suddenly felt the class president clinging to his back. She was hopeless. She said she got caught in his wind magic and climbed onto his back. Since he hadn't learned how to stop yet, the pair plummeted like a bomb. As a result, they took down all the monsters and managed to survive. The guy they saved thanked them and introduced himself, surprising Haruka that he understood Japanese. He asked why they were attacked and learned that they were adventurers on a monster extermination quest from the guild. They thought they'd make some money, but almost died instead. Those monsters were called giant green wolves. Haruka was fine, then turned to see the class president still dazed. He had to wait for the girls to arrive, so he gave the adventurers some mushrooms to recover their stamina. These were rare and hard to find for adventurers, so they were thrilled. And here he was, sick of eating them. Suddenly, Haruka felt uncomfortable seeing the two old guys with the three young girls. He was about to attack them when his friend stopped him. A bit later, the crazy girls arrived. Seeing how pretty the adventurers were, they wanted to shake their hands. Thanks to that, they were given directions to the city called Omui. Everyone was excited, even making Haruka draw lines on the ground to celebrate. Switching to the delinquents, after leveling up in the forest, they were much more confident, wanting to hunt down the girls immediately, while also finding a way to unseal their charm skill, figuring they had to target the otakus first. The muscleheads sensed danger and wanted to warn the girls. Entering the city with indescribable joy, the people here were quite friendly and welcoming. Haruka was sure a place like this wasn't suitable for a loner like him. Getting the girls here meant they were safe, so he was relieved. After completing his mission, he sat down for a drink. But the class president scolded him and immediately gathered everyone. Seeing this, Haruka was very satisfied. After the training, the girls were more united. She announced the schedule to the group. If they split up, no one would be able to find each other. First, they would go to the Adventurers Guild to register and exchange monster loot for cash. After getting money, they would find an inn to rest. As for finding the otakus, the troublesome girls were still worried, but pretended not to care. Later, the group arrived at the Adventurers Guild. Why is it so intimidating? Everyone inside looks like they could eat us alive. Luckily, the kind man called them in to meet the guildmaster. Haruka told his friend, "Let them register first. I'll do it later." Haruka went up to the second floor, which looked exactly like the first, full of tough-looking guys, scary as hell. The guildmaster, a man covered in scars and with an icy stare, accompanied him, making him uneasy. The guildmaster thanked Haruka for saving his men. It was nothing. He thought he was in trouble, but it turned out he was getting a certificate of commendation. He also took the opportunity to sell the monster cores. After appraisal, the guild would determine the price. Since he had a lot, Haruka only dared to bring out a small bag. Even that small bag was a shock. It was the first time they'd seen someone bring so many cores to sell. The receptionist made an appointment for the next day to appraise them all. It would take a while to count and calculate the price. His group of girls had already registered. The two familiar men were shocked, because all the girls were above level 30. Their levels had increased along the way, making everyone happy. Then it turned out Haruka was only level 9, not qualified to register as an adventurer. That stung. While everyone was praised for their level, Haruka felt terrible. Damn those skills that screwed over the user, even though he'd defeated so many monsters. His level didn't increase. He asked to be given a special rank, but was refused. If everyone was like him, the guild would be in chaos. Also, solo players like Haruka had to be level 20 to be considered newbies, and level 30 to be recognized as real adventurers. This meant he was currently just a worthless nobody. To make matters worse, his Lonesome King skill didn't allow him to join a party. At this rate, it might take him another 10 years to reach level 30. Damn it! Haruka cried for his fate. Forever a useless piece of trash. His friend felt sad too, thinking they couldn't rely on him anymore. That night, they followed the guild's directions to find a place to rent. When they arrived, the place had pink lights, looking exactly like a love hotel. Luckily, it was a normal inn inside, so the group had a good night's sleep. On the 19th morning since their transfer, the girls had money to spend thanks to selling the monster cores. The city also seemed safe, so it was perfect for settling down. Haruka was happy, wanting to take his share of the money and return to the forest. However, when he arrived at the guild, they didn't have enough funds to buy everything, so they only paid half, promising to pay the rest later. He saw the guild master apologize, so he wasn't upset. The current payment was around 8 million. To thank them for saving his men, the kind man took them shopping for equipment. Haruka imagined going to a brothel, making the class president worry. When they arrived, it was an old shop, but the items sold were high quality. Most of the items here came from dungeons, perfect for unusual people like Haruka. The shopkeeper looked shady, but seemed nice. He tried out a few items and found them decent. Shopping until evening, he found a number 7 necklace. He asked the shopkeeper and learned it was used to combine with other equipment. The number 7 corresponded to 7 items. Combined with his inherent villager skills, he thought he could create many new things. He was excited but was interrupted when the class president called him back because it was getting late. He was about to combine something when he accidentally dropped it into a pile of other items. As a result, he had to pay over 10 million, but he only had 8 million. Luckily, the two men vouched for him. The next morning, Haruka was devastated. He hadn't bought much, but he was already out of money. To earn more, he had to collect monster cores, so he planned to leave the city. The problem was he wasn't registered, so he needed a pass to get out. Asking the class president wasn't a good idea. He tried to blend in with the girls but was caught. Life here wasn't free at all, so he decided to return to the forest at any cost. He'd bought an invisibility cloak yesterday, and combined with his villager skills, its effectiveness increased significantly. Even the class president wouldn't be able to recognize him. He went downstairs, concealing his presence, and successfully slipped past everyone. Running to a section of the wall without guards, Haruka was about to jump over when he lost his footing, because the girls had spotted him. Serves him right for being stupid and taking off the cloak before he was even outside. Haruka realized this group of girls was called the 4 heavenly queens of the class. They looked at him curiously. Noticing one was missing, he used his search ability, only to find the silly girl about to change clothes. They had to rush over to stop her, and got scolded for already being completely undressed. Seeing Haruka tease her about being naked, she got upset and made him apologize and compliment her outfit before calming down. The next day, the girls went on their first mission. Haruka had to stay home because the muscleheads had told the class president about him trying to climb the wall. Facing her strong objections, he pretended to be obedient to trick them into leaving. Immediately after, he used his invisibility cloak to sneak out. Of course, the guards didn't notice a thing. Then, Haruka, like a dog let off its leash, ran like crazy back to his beloved forest. After a while, he stumbled upon a village that had just been attacked. Seeing there were survivors, he continued on. He then ran into a group of goblins laughing and chatting. Haruka wanted to kill them all, but was afraid the girls would chase after him, so he ignored them. Only when he saw a group of bandits threatening some villagers did he stop, saving one guy. Seeing he looked like a newbie, the bandit attacked him. Haruka rolled his eyes. This guy was incredibly weak, but liked to show off. The other bandits joined in, insulting him. Having enough, he used his petrification spell on the jerks. That combined item from the other day was pretty good. The three bandits, spared from being turned to stone, didn't learn their lesson, assuming he was a mage since he used magic, and approached him. They got beaten to a pulp. He was actually pretty good at hand-to-hand combat. The leader, seeing how weird he was, asked, "What kind of mage are you?" Haruka honestly replied, "Actually, I don't have a class, I'm just a villager." After checking and seeing he really was level 9, they weren't scared anymore. They used their long-range skills to attack. Based on his judgment, Haruka knew he couldn't block them, so he dodged. Luckily, their attacks were simple and slow, so he dodged them all. After a while, he got bored. These three were idiots. Who announces their attacks while fighting? In the end, despite using up all his mana, they didn't land a single hit. Seeing them out of breath, Haruka teased them, realizing they were too weak for the weapons they were using. The young lady inside the carriage, whom Haruka had helped, came over to thank him. She introduced herself as Mariel, a noble. Suddenly, Haruka felt annoyed, not wanting to get involved. She was pretty clueless, seeing these bandits and not knowing what to do, even blaming Haruka for initially seeming like he was going to run away without helping. Putting that aside, she wanted to ask Haruka to escort her home. As the daughter of a city lord, she was afraid of being attacked again. Having Haruka come along would guarantee her safety and repay him for his help. He thought about it for a moment, figuring he could make some money from this, so he agreed, wanting to stop by her place to get his reward and then leave. She asked where he was from, but he couldn't remember, telling her about his experience in that city, calling it a small city that put on airs. They were slow at appraising monster cores, taking a whole day. The adventurer registration was also crap. They didn't even give him a rank. Plus, you couldn't leave without a pass. Haruka thought the lord of that place must be a bad guy. Hearing this, Mariel looked sad, apologizing because the lord of that city was her father. After hearing his criticisms, she suddenly felt inadequate. Haruka realized the carriage was heading back to Omui and demanded to get off immediately. "I spent all day escaping, and now you're taking me back?" He yelled, "No way!" But she wouldn't let him off, wanting to prove that the city wasn't as bad as he thought. Switching to the forest, a battle was taking place between the muscleheads and the delinquents. The delinquents told them to get out of the way, but they refused, wanting to protect the girls. As the delinquent leader charged in, he was stabbed from behind by someone. Seeing this, the others were confused. The remaining delinquents attacked, but they were all taken down by that guy's superior combat skills. Knowing they couldn't win against this cold-blooded person, the muscleheads tried to run. Haruka was brought to Muriel's house. Since she was the daughter of the city's leader, everything was huge, making him feel uneasy. So he planned to leave. She had just finished changing and got upset seeing him like that. He pretended he just wanted to go out for some fresh air, but she didn't believe him. Since he was already there, he might as well stay, she insisted, and she would entertain him. Okay, bring out everything you have. I'm hungry." Quickly, a table full of delicious food was laid out before him. This was a thank you gift for saving her from the bandits. Since coming here, he never thought he'd have a day like this. Mariel was happy and had her servants offer him some spending money. Also, knowing he didn't have any identification, she made him a fake ID. It had the city's emblem and his name on it, so he could use it to travel freely. It was great. His identity would be guaranteed. She complained while talking, annoyed that he'd criticized her city's management. Haruka, on the other hand, ignored her, focusing on the food. The most annoying thing was that he'd dressed up but didn't get any compliments. The next morning, the girls gathered and questioned Haruka about where he'd been. He said he was invited to the Lord's house for a meal. The class president wanted to believe him, but was too suspicious, asking why he was invited to the Lord's mansion. He couldn't answer that. If she knew he'd snuck out of the city, there would be trouble. The others cared less about him and urged her to go on their mission for the day. She reminded him again, "Don't leave the city." He acted obedient, promising not to go anywhere. But as soon as they left, Haruka ran off. Nothing could stop him from doing what he wanted anymore. He just had to show the guards his awesome card and could leave any time. Before returning to the forest, Haruka used the money he received to buy equipment and stock up on food. He figured he'd be eating mushrooms again, so he left a letter for his friend, saying he was visiting the muscleheads for a few days, so she shouldn't worry. As soon as he entered the forest, Haruka saw the familiar mushrooms growing everywhere. They hadn't been picked recently, so they were thriving. The flowing water, the floating clouds, the birds, the fish, and even those weak monsters he used to encounter. The solitary atmosphere here suited him better. He was about to head back to his beloved home for a good night's sleep when he was suddenly attacked by a young orc. This was strange. Orcs usually appeared deeper in the forest. Haruka was now strong enough to take one down single-handedly. He had to admit, his upgraded staff was really powerful. Even his invisibility cloak was improved, reflecting magic and helping him evade enemies. Living alone in the forest would be much easier now. Continuing on, Haruka stumbled upon bloodstains. The forest seemed quieter than usual. This was a bad sign, so he followed the trail to see if the muscleheads were okay. If those four were really trying to protect the girls, this would be a big fight. What he saw next shocked him. His friends were all knocked out, badly injured. Luckily, they were still breathing, so there was still hope. Haruka used a fast-acting healing potion made from mushrooms to wake them up. He was extremely worried, thinking, "They're so strong. How did this happen?" After opening his eyes, one of them asked, "Is Haruka okay?" Amazing! They were out of danger, which was good, and he was relieved to hear the girls were safe in the city. Incredible! They'd managed to protect them. Haruka praised them, calling them the strongest meatheads in the class. They told him about what happened yesterday. Their new enemy was incredibly dangerous, strong enough to kill all the delinquents. Haruka still couldn't believe that Tanaka would do something so cruel. He suddenly felt worried about the otakus, afraid something had happened to them too. We're not sure about them, but more importantly, that guy, he's really strong. Even though we worked together, we couldn't touch him. Everyone knew Tanaka was a math genius, so maybe everything was planned from the beginning. Luckily, they knew his motive for doing these terrible things. His main target was the class president's plunder, skill. Haruka was shocked. He didn't expect them to realize she possessed the most powerful skill. He initially thought only the otakus knew about this, but after Tanaka repeatedly asked about the class president, they'd figured it out. Fortunately, he'd lost track of the girls, which was why he tortured them for information. Using a diversion tactic, they intentionally led that bastard to their hideout. He wasn't there yet, but if he followed the blood trail, he would arrive eventually. One of the muscleheads thought that with Haruka fighting alongside them, they would definitely have a chance to win. Haruka hated violence and didn't want to fight, but seeing his friends pushed to this point, he had no choice. Hearing this, they were encouraged, wanting to fight right away. However, Haruka refused to let them follow, wanting to fight alone. This was to ensure their safety, so he gave them a serious look to show his determination. Seeing that, they were intimidated, figuring Haruka had a plan, so they let him do his thing. He told them to go back to the city and reunite with the class president, also apologizing for their past actions. Having no other choice, they agreed, entrusting him with the responsibility. Fighting alone was the right decision. If anything happened to him, there would still be a last line of defense to protect the girls. To defeat his enemy, Haruka was determined to grind levels to become stronger. Currently, his harem was searching everywhere for him, but couldn't find him. They still thought he was just messing around like usual, so they weren't worried. Haruka knew his opponents frequently used skills and weapons from the guy's stories. After defeating the bandits, he realized that once their weapon's special ability was activated, it couldn't be cancelled, creating a major opening to exploit. To counter his opponent, he wanted to develop a new set of skills. Suddenly, some pretty strong goblins were attracted by the smell of blood. These would be resources for leveling up, so Haruka killed them all. Unexpectedly, a king goblin appeared. Haruka had never seen one before, and was a bit intimidated. Unlike the smaller goblins, The King Goblin was extremely fast and strategic in combat, using fire attacks that gave Haruka trouble. Luckily, the cloak did its job, allowing Haruka to dodge safely. Seeing this wasn't working, Haruka went all out, accumulating magic power and combining various skills to enhance his weapon. With incredible speed, he slashed down the King Goblin in a flash, combining useless skills for a surprisingly effective attack. He was proud of himself when suddenly, another creature appeared right behind him. Checking its stats, he saw the title, Goblin Emperor. Apparently, it was the previous monster's boss, level 50, while Haruka was still level 9, so he didn't know how to fight it. He continued combining his useless skills, aiming for a one-hit KO. The two clashed at terrifying speeds. Unfortunately, this opponent was completely different from what he imagined. Despite being hit, it showed no signs of pain or discomfort. Moreover, this creature used Drunken Fist, moving erratically but attacking with extreme precision, forcing Haruka to constantly dodge. Realizing it was using a weapon skill, he found an opening and landed a hit. He thought he had the advantage, but the monster regenerated and continued attacking. Before Haruka could think of a plan, the Goblin Emperor unleashed a deadly blow, aiming to kill him. Luckily, Haruka blocked with his weapon, avoiding any broken bones. He knew stopping meant defeat. Thinking of his friend's near death, Haruka rallied himself. This is nothing compared to what they went through. So, the two continued their fierce battle until morning. In the end, Haruka won by fighting desperately. Yet, he only leveled up twice. How frustrating. Back at his home to rest, Haruka started thinking about learning new skills. He also understood more about his Jack of all trades, master of none skill. While it made him level up slowly, it also made learning new skills easier. His goal was to create an attack that required no preparation, exploiting openings to deliver finishing blows. With this, he was sure he could counter his opponent's strengths. By afternoon, what was coming finally came. Tanaka was surprised to see Haruka waiting for him. Back with the girls, after a day without their guy around, they were a little down, wondering, when will he come back? We miss him. The guys happened to be waiting there, so the class president rushed over to check on them. Despite their injuries, they said they were fine. The important thing was that Haruka was facing danger alone in the forest. They told her this so everyone could find a way to help, worried he would be in trouble. After all, he was their classmate. Tanaka initially thought the muscleheads would take him to the class president, but it turned out this was Haruka's place, so he prepared to leave. Knowing he'd planned everything from the start, Haruka asked why. Tanaka chuckled, revealing he was the one who manipulated the delinquents, causing the class to fall apart. Haruka angrily asked, "Where are the others?" and was told they were all dead. He was looked down upon for having only garbage skills, making Tanaka not even consider him a threat. Hearing this, Haruka shoved his staff in Tanaka's face, confusing him. He asked, "What does this have to do with a loner like you?" Haruka declared he would protect everyone, infuriating Tanaka, who wanted to kill him. Quickly, the battle between these two opposites began. Haruka's vision was blocked by rocks and earth. Tanaka revealed that in the white room where the class was initially brought, he confirmed the remaining skills were all trash, worthless. "I wonder if someone with garbage skills can even fight me." He launched rocks and earth, simultaneously activating another skill called Interference. True to its name, it allowed him to interfere with his opponent's speed, preventing evasion. Meanwhile, the class president and her friends were discussing the situation. She wanted to help Haruka defeat Tanaka, but was stopped by the muscleheads. It was too dangerous. Besides, she was the target. Weakened by Tanaka's skill, Haruka was constantly dodging a barrage of attacks. Seeing this, Tanaka switched to a different skill. Sharp thorns erupted from the ground, randomly. Luckily, Haruka managed to escape. Tanaka was impressed. "I thought you were useless, but you're stronger than those guys I killed." Before continuing, he wanted to know when Haruka started suspecting him. Haruka said it was from the beginning. A math genius hanging out with delinquents was definitely suspicious. Hearing this, Tanaka acknowledged Haruka's sharp mind. Turns out, he wasn't just a bookworm. Haruka asked him when he started planning this. Tanaka said it was also from the beginning, when the class president got the Plunder skill. He then used the stupid delinquents to slowly carry out his plan to become the strongest. Caught off guard, Haruka was trapped, unable to dodge Tanaka's fire magic, which scorched the surrounding area. Tanaka taunted, I thought this fight would be easy. However, Haruka was completely unharmed, using his evolved staff to absorb the magic. Tanaka realized these kinds of attacks were useless against him. He was shocked. Haruka took advantage of the moment before Tanaka could use his weapon skill, and rushed in for close combat. Unfortunately, Tanaka had a hidden card, able to summon his sword at any time. If magic doesn't work, I'll just switch to physical attacks. Knowing Tanaka was intentionally showing a weakness, Haruka was wary. This guy was too cunning. Tanaka boasted, "I'm deciding which weapon to use to break your fighting spirit." After defeating his classmates, he possessed a vast arsenal. Finding it hard to choose, he decided to use them all against Haruka. Haruka struggled, only able to block with his staff. The enemy constantly switched weapons, making his attacks unpredictable. The crazy guy enjoyed himself, relentlessly attacking Haruka. When he switched to weapon skills, Haruka couldn't defend anymore and was sent flying, taking 2 direct hits. Even though they hit his wooden staff, the damage was significant. Haruka gasped, thinking this was bad, trying to read his opponent. But Tanaka used such a variety of weapons that it was impossible to grasp his pattern. He then realized Tanaka's skill was copy, mimicking everyone's skills, which was why he was so strong. Haruka understood now. Tanaka wanted to find the class president to copy her. Plunder. Skill, then kill her and make it his own. He would then use plunder to steal even more useful skills, becoming the ultimate powerhouse. Haruka also realized some weaknesses of copy. Tanaka had gotten this strong by imitating others, not through training like him. The battle continued with long-range weapon skill attacks. Haruka could barely do anything. Whenever he got close, Tanaka used illusions to escape. Thinking Haruka had given up, Tanaka charged in, only to be tricked. Haruka had gotten used to his speed and dodged easily, exposing Tanaka's copy limitation. He could only use a skill 3 times. Hit where it hurt, Tanaka started attacking wildly, but he couldn't land a hit. Feeling strangely disadvantaged, he was confused. Haruka continued toying with him, saying he was just testing the limits of copy, intentionally losing, so he would use his skills repeatedly. Thanks to this, he realized the bastard didn't use the same skill more than twice in a row to conserve uses. Everything had a limit. If he used up everything he'd copied, he'd be useless. This battle was simply about dodging. He had already won. Provoked, Tanaka angrily shouted that he still had plenty of skills. He was about to attack when Haruka beat him to the punch. Now it was his turn to show off. He didn't have any powerful skills, but through hard work and learning to combine what he had, Haruka had overcome the initial difficulties, unlike someone who only relied on others' abilities. Cornered, Tanaka suddenly used a new skill to bite Haruka, surprising him. As expected of Tanaka, he wasn't easy to defeat. Enraged, he couldn't understand how he could lose to someone like Haruka. This wasn't right. But he claimed he still had a trump card and had to end the fight here. This is an ultimate skill, even stronger than the previous ones. Haruka didn't know what it was, so he was wary. Tanaka moved nimbly, but didn't immediately reveal his trump card. His normal attacks were easy to block. He then used the flying rocks and earth as cover, blending in with them. Haruka lost track of him and became worried. Knowing the next attack was the real deal, Tanaka finally unleashed his ultimate skill. It was called Feint, able to instantly kill anyone within close range using just words. Haruka collapsed in pain, unable to do anything. After seemingly killing him, Tanaka gloated, having eliminated an obstacle. He was a bit surprised by Haruka's abilities, but in the end, he still died. He commended Haruka for pushing him to his limits. He actually wanted to conserve this skill, but if he got plunder from the class president, he could use it freely without limitations. He turned to leave, bidding Haruka farewell, wishing him a pleasant sleep for eternity. However, about 2 seconds later, Haruka woke up like nothing happened. Tanaka was shocked, unable to believe his eyes. He was sure Haruka was dead. He was currently level 11. If hit by Feint, it was a guaranteed instant kill. This was just his assumption though. Haruka's villager body was extremely resilient, immune to status effects. And Tanaka's skill was one such effect. Moreover, since arriving, Haruka had maxed out his luck stat. It was higher than anyone else's in this world. Thanks to this, the success rate of Feint against him was extremely low. His collapse earlier was just an act. Since his opponent used his trump card, He had to play along so he wouldn't be embarrassed. Humiliated, Tanaka furiously asked how Haruka could still move and attack. You were clearly affected by interference. Your movement was disrupted. Haruka admitted he was greatly restricted, but had a garbage skill that allowed him to control his body called Scarecrow. It suited him perfectly in many ways. By turning his body into a puppet, he could still move as he wished. Of course, he had mastered this skill beforehand. It was difficult initially, but with effort, he got used to it. So, when hit by Tanaka's interference, he could still move miraculously. In short, even garbage skills could be useful if you knew how to use them. Tanaka refused to admit defeat and continued attacking relentlessly. He bombarded Haruka with skills, but none of them landed. It seemed the story was coming to an end. Tanaka couldn't believe his calculations were wrong. Normally, 1-1 should equal 2, right? Haruka affirmed. In our old world, it would be 2. Too bad this is a world of swords and magic. So 1-1 isn't 2, it's much greater than that. Tanaka's past then flashed before his eyes. He had been so bored with school math. The lectures became meaningless, and he had to live among less intelligent people. He often wished for those days to end quickly. And when he was summoned, he was ecstatic. Before him were tons of skills, making him realize that if he knew how to use them, life wouldn't be boring anymore. So, he made calculations to create an exciting future, even if it meant sacrificing his friends. I thought if I killed everyone, I would win and become the strongest. But now, someone with only garbage skills like Haruka was ruining everything. He charged in to attack, but had his weapon knocked away. Just as Haruka thought he was out of tricks, the sword flew back, stabbing him. So, he still had a remote control skill. I win after all, as he thought, then struck Haruka repeatedly. Perhaps he was too caught up in the moment, because he didn't realize all his attacks were useless. Haruka had coated his body in magic power like always, but this time, it had a golden aura. Tanaka was struck with a painful blow and lectured. How can borrowed power defeat those who train diligently like me? Fear filled his mind. Because people had died by his hand, Haruka couldn't forgive him. Just as Tanaka prepared for a desperate last stand, Haruka delivered the finishing blow. Unsure if Tanaka was dead, Haruka left, thinking, even garbage skills have their uses. I don't have anything powerful, but I'm resourceful. After the battle, Haruka realized he was completely out of mana. Fighting someone like Tanaka was incredibly dangerous. One wrong move, and he'd be dead. Luckily, he hadn't made any mistakes. His wounds were bleeding heavily. He'd used all his healing potions on the muscleheads, so he had to endure, waiting for death. Images of the class president and everyone else flashed before his eyes. He thanked them and collapsed, but then he was caught by his 4 friends. The otakus weren't dead, they'd returned to repay their debt to him. After drinking the potion they brought, he was out of danger and was helped back to the city. The 4 said they had met the others earlier, and after learning that Haruka was fighting alone, they rushed to save him. After all, the otakus had a lot of experience. His friends were still waiting for him to return. Seeing him alive, the girls were overjoyed, saying they'd prepared food for him. The muscleheads also came to congratulate him on his victory, knowing he was exhausted. His harem even wanted to give him a bath, putting him in a difficult position. The troublesome girls took this opportunity to apologize to the otakus for kicking them out after they'd saved them. Talk about ungrateful. They expressed their gratitude, though late, but the otakus didn't mind and forgave them. Seeing this, Haruka thought his mission was complete and immediately tried to return to the forest. The class president spotted him and scolded him. "Where do you think you're going?" She hugged him tightly, preventing his escape, saying she was so worried if he died. Who would she marry? Having no choice, he stayed and apologized for making her cry. The girls then captured him, dragging him back to lecture him for putting himself in danger. That night, Haruka dreamt of a lonely figure waiting for something in a deep, dark abyss. He woke up wondering if it was an omen. Today was the 26th day since he and his classmates were brought to this other world. His body hadn't fully recovered from the fight with Tanaka, so he felt a bit tired. The otakus were planning to explore a dungeon. Lately, many monsters had appeared here, making things difficult for them. Their goal was to hunt for rare treasures, but they were unlucky and hadn't found anything yet. Curious, Haruka asked about the treasure's use and learned it could help change people's impressions of someone. Perfect for those quiet types like them. Hearing this, they laughed. Haruka was the one to talk. He was no different. Seeing his friends doing well made him happy. He, on the other hand, hadn't achieved anything significant. So he decided to leave the city and return to his cave. Before he could pack, the class president called him out for a lecture. He didn't care, saying she'd already scolded him enough yesterday. She knew, but he kept wanting to leave them, so she continued lecturing him. She said she would keep this up until he gave up on that idea. She also reminded him that he'd put himself in mortal danger, and forbade him from doing anything like that again. Okay, I'll be good, so stop scolding me. Seeing him promise, she finally left for her mission. Haruka was now stuck between being scolded daily by the class president and having the free life he always wanted. Suddenly, Haruka got the idea to go get the impression changer, treasure that the 4 otaku had been talking about. Using it would make his friends see him differently, giving him the freedom to do whatever he wanted. The scene shifted to the Lord's mansion. Mariel was advising her father not to overwork himself, as it was affecting his health. He knew this, but as the city's leader, he had to do it. Lately, monsters had been appearing more frequently in Omui, making him even busier. Trade had significantly decreased as a result. He had to find a solution so everything could develop stably. Suddenly, a soldier rushed in, reporting that a horde of monsters had escaped the labyrinth and was heading toward the city. Along the way, they had destroyed several villages. This was a red alert for the city. Oblivious to everything happening, Haruka cheerfully headed towards the labyrinth, ready for some fun. His ability to sense energy signatures had alerted him to a massive horde of powerful monsters nearby. He didn't care where they were going, but seeing so many of them excited him. This would be a nice warm-up before exploring the dungeon. Back at the group, Mariel had delivered urgent news to the guildmaster. A horde of orcs was attacking Omui, already destroying several villages. Upon hearing this, all the adventurers, including the girls' group, were dispatched to intercept the monsters and protect the city and its people. The class president ran off to inform her friends, but couldn't find that darn Haruka anywhere. Meanwhile, Haruka was single-handedly tearing through the horde. They even had their orc king, but Haruka was handling them all. Tough luck for them running into him. They were excitedly leaving the labyrinth, ready to wreak havoc on the city, but they got wiped out instead. The adventurers waited and waited, but no monsters ever arrived. They were suspicious, but couldn't let their guard down, so they continued to wait. After finishing off the Orc King, Haruka wondered, is there some kind of festival today? Why are so many of them heading out? He didn't think much of it, and continued into the labyrinth to search for the treasure. Though unsure of the dangers ahead, his spirits were high. Exploring a labyrinth is so exciting. No wonder my otaku friends are always so eager to go. There, Haruka found a few treasure chests. But when he opened them, they were filled with nothing but junk. He wondered, did I wander into a garbage dump or something? Having no other options, he decided to head back to the guy's shop from before to ask for information. Since the shop specialized in items found within the labyrinth, he figured the owner would know something. Night had fallen, but the orc horde had yet to appear. The guildmaster turned to Mariel, accusingly. Did you get the information wrong? If it was accurate, they should be here by now. There's no way they'd stop to rest. Seeing a figure approaching, everyone went on alert, but it was just Haruka. He grinned and asked, why is everyone having a bonfire out here? He had assumed it was a festival. He then got an earful from the class president. She scolded him, explaining that the city was about to be attacked by monsters, and they were defending it. Yet he had been off goofing around somewhere and was only just now returning. Haruka didn't dare explain where he'd actually been. But when he learned the monsters everyone was talking about were orcs, Haruka casually mentioned he'd already taken care of them. He said innocently, I don't know why there were so many of them. I just went ahead and wiped them all out. Everyone was shocked. The girls' group, seeing that Haruka had once again put himself in danger, glared at him. Didn't we just lecture you about this the other day? As a result, the class president smacked him and dragged him back to the guild for another scolding. Mariel, however, was grateful that he had defeated the orcs and saved the city. The guildmaster agreed that facing that many monsters alone was incredibly dangerous, and gave Haruka a stern talking to as well. Having so many people lecture him was starting to annoy Haruka, but he couldn't really blame them given the sheer number of monsters. Everyone was worried about another monster surge happening soon. Mariel also pleaded with Haruka not to foolishly charge into another horde like he had today, as these events were rare and usually involved unpredictable and dangerous monsters. Seeing how much they cared, Haruka promised not to do it again. His free and solitary life in another world is slipping further and further away. He needed to find that item that boosted his likability, and fast. This just wouldn't do. So the next day, Haruka went to greet the shop owner from before, who immediately started begging for mercy. Haruka explained, "I'm not here to buy anything, so relax." He wanted to know about a treasure that increased likability. The owner mentioned, "The pheromone ring in the nearby labyrinth has that effect, but it's pretty hard to get. It's likely located somewhere no one has ever been." Haruka, instantly excited, wanted to find it. According to the shop owner, he'd likely find it on the 50th floor or deeper. Typical labyrinths had around 100 floors, but not everyone could descend that far, as they needed to defeat the boss of each area. It would be a long journey, not something he'd find in a day or two. There are still many mysteries down there, like the tales of the ancient hero and the legend of the labyrinth saint. If you're going exploring, you'll definitely need recovery items. Hearing this, Haruka immediately ran off to buy some elsewhere, afraid of breaking the shop owner's merchandise again. Unintentionally, some of the boys overheard this conversation. News quickly reached the class president and the girls' group, who were frustrated that Haruka never listened to them. They feared that if he got the pheromone ring, every girl in class would fall for him. So, they devised a plan to stop him at all costs. Haruka, blissfully unaware, happily made his way to the labyrinth. He was promptly intercepted by the girls and the otaku group. The class president demanded, "What are you doing at the labyrinth? Don't tell me you're looking for the pheromone ring." Caught red-handed, Haruka tried to deny it. "I'm just looking for King Solomon's ring. No one bought it." They all glared at him. Knowing discretion was the better part of valor, he ran into the labyrinth, ignoring his friends' attempts to stop him. The class president warned him about traps, but Haruka boasted, "My luck stat is maxed out, so I'll be fine." Immediately after saying that, he tripped and plummeted down to the 107th floor. His friends above were incredibly worried, but there was nothing they could do. Somehow, perhaps luckily, he didn't die from the fall, thanks to his newly acquired material transformation skill. He also bypassed having to fight the bosses on the previous floors. Seeing only one path ahead, he declared, "This is the bottom of society." And of course, a place like this wouldn't be complete without powerful monsters. Initially, Haruka was scared and tried to use his combination skill to fly back up, but it didn't work. After scouting the area, he didn't detect any traps ahead, so he felt a little reassured. Above, wanting to rescue Haruka, the entire class was in action, progressing through the floors, hoping to find him soon. The otaku were worried, as they hadn't packed enough food or recovery items. Haruka, down below, was having difficulty breathing. The magical energy here was even denser than in the forest. Ahead, there was only one door, so he realized, if I want to go back, I'll have to defeat the boss of the 101th floor. As soon as he opened the door, the immense power emanating from within terrified him. It was just like his dream the other night, a lone skeleton. He almost had a heart attack when he realized the opponent before him was the Labyrinth Saint, level 100. His friends were currently resting on the 47th floor. The girls' group had gotten much stronger, so descending further was still possible. The otaku group had their knowledge, so they hadn't run into any serious problems yet. After defeating each floor's boss, a portal would appear in the labyrinth, allowing them to leave if they wanted. In theory, this only worked if they were going from top to bottom. Haruka, however, was going the opposite way. "We might have to go down to Haruka to rescue our precious friend." Haruka accepted the danger and pressed on. The muscleheads thought, "Haruka will be fine, probably." The otaku explained that the Labyrinth Saint supposedly controlled the Labyrinth King. Its mere existence empowered the other monsters. The class president and the others steeled themselves to continue their journey to rescue their friend. Haruka's battle had yet to begin. Looking at the opponent's stats, which were all question marks, he thought his eyes were malfunctioning. That Tanaka guy was strong, but compared to the Labyrinth Saint, he's ancient history. Haruka made the first move, using his flash step technique to close the distance. Figuring this guy was skilled in magic, hand-to-hand combat seemed like the best approach. Surprisingly, even though he'd launched an incredibly fast attack, it was countered. Even the move he used to defeat Tanaka was useless. Level 100 was no joke, and Haruka was starting to sweat. Back at the Lord's mansion, there was a sense of foreboding. Seeing her father lost in thought, Mariel asked him about the darkening sky above the deepest part of the labyrinth. She had a feeling something terrible was about to happen, something even worse than the previous monster attack. He didn't have any answers yet, so he could only send Mariel to inform the Adventurers Guild to be prepared for battle at any moment. Back with Haruka, realizing normal attacks were ineffective, he switched to his magic armor state, focusing all his skills on increasing his speed. But no matter how fast he got, the Labyrinth Saint kept up. Every move Haruka made was effortlessly parried. Refusing to give up, he continued to accelerate until he felt like he was about to be impaled. But surprisingly, the Saint didn't strike. He now had skills called God's Eye and Precognition. These abilities were amplified by the contact lenses he wore, allowing him to move so miraculously. Without them, his normal eyes wouldn't be able to keep up. Plus, he could see the near future, enabling him to make decisions faster. They say the best defense is a good offense. Fearing he'd be cut down at his current speed, Haruka kept rushing in, attacking frantically. After a while, he started to tire and noticed something strange. After his big fight with Tanaka, he felt strangely exhilarated fighting a strong opponent. His physical and magical energy were reaching their limits, and he worried he might lose consciousness. His opponent, however, was still going strong, showing no signs of fatigue. He should have been cut down several times by now, but for some reason, the Labyrinth Saint wasn't attacking. During the fight, Haruka noticed that the Saint was different from other monsters. Despite fighting, the Saint emitted no killing intent and didn't seem to want to kill Haruka. He figured the Labyrinth Saint could kill him at any moment and was just toying with him. Unwilling to be underestimated, he continued to attack with all his might. As he suspected, the skeleton only defended, making no attempt to injure him. Even when Haruka's sword was at its neck, the Saint stopped its arm, refusing to kill. Haruka wondered, is this guy being controlled? Is that why he's fighting me? Having reached this conclusion, Haruka decided to help. His special staff continuously absorbed the darkness, as it was also a form of magical energy. He didn't quite understand it, but it was a lucky break. He let the wooden staff touch the Saint's sword, drawing the darkness out. The Labyrinth Saint cooperated fully, letting Haruka do as he pleased. After absorbing a significant amount, Haruka launched a finishing blow, severing the dark energy's connection and preventing it from re-entering the skeleton. The battle was over. But then, Haruka realized a painful truth. His opponent wanted to die, and wanted Haruka to grant that wish. If left alone, the darkness would eventually reclaim the Saint's body. Knowing Haruka understood, the Labyrinth Saint dropped its sword, accepting its fate. The previously absorbed darkness began to gather again. Haruka knew that if he didn't act, the Saint would continue to suffer. It seemed like the Saint had been waiting a long time to meet someone who could end its torment. Resigned, Haruka prepared to strike, but at the last moment, he stopped. He understood the Saint's feelings, so instead of killing it, he embraced it, showing his respect. He didn't know how long the Labyrinth Saint had been here, but he was certain it had been incredibly lonely. And to his surprise, the Saint was a woman. As he was having this touching moment, his Dominate skill suddenly activated, giving him control over the Saint, similar to what he had done with the delinquent girls before. The darkness was powerless now. The Labyrinth Saint was under Haruka's control, so even if it managed to possess the Saint again, it couldn't force it to do anything. He had inadvertently done a good deed, freeing the skeleton from the labyrinth. Suddenly feeling awkward, Haruka asked for an introduction. The skeleton fully understood him and wasn't angry about being dominated. After checking her stats again, he saw her skills and level had changed. It seemed her name before death was Angelica, so Haruka tried calling her that. He was also shocked that he had dominated a girl. If the class president finds out, she'll totally kill me. The two then left the 101C floor and began their ascent. With his spatial awareness, Haruka easily located the 100 floor and started making their way up. As expected, to proceed, they needed to defeat the floor's boss. Their opponent was a suit of iron armor, also level 100, making Haruka a little nervous. The fight with Angelica was easier because she wasn't trying to kill me. Going all out against this thing? I'm getting cold feet. He tried to be clever and dig a tunnel to the floor above. But two level 99 Minotaurs appeared, blocking his path. And they were ridiculously high level. I thought I was a goner. But then the two Minotaurs above suddenly jumped down a floor. They ended up fighting each other to a standstill, leaving each with only one hit point left. Haruka easily finished them off. My max luck stat must be working overtime. After dealing with the 3 powerful monsters, his new companion gave him a strange look, as if thinking, "This guy fights dirty." Noticing the armor, Angelica asked to try it on, and Haruka agreed. After equipping her, he found it hilarious because she had no flesh. Suddenly, the armor contracted, hugging her form as if someone was inside. Haruka was relieved. This looked much better. Upon examining it, he discovered the armor was cursed. It was called the Silver Armor and couldn't be removed unless the wearer was killed. Angelica was annoyed he hadn't checked it before she put it on. Clearly upset, she ignored Haruka and walked off. Back with their friends above, they had reached the 50th floor. Despite their best efforts, they were exhausted and still hadn't found any sign of Haruka. They then faced the incredibly powerful boss of the 50th floor. From the otaku's perspective, it was a giant. At the guild, Mariel informed the guildmaster about the strange occurrences in the labyrinth. The guards hadn't reported anything, so they hoped she was wrong. But just in case, a few adventurers volunteered to investigate. The guildmaster was puzzled. None of Haruka's friends had come in for any quest today. On the 98th floor, Haruka had made amends with Angelica by giving her a nice-looking cloak. His energy-sensing skill activated, indicating the floor's boss had appeared. Sure enough, it was level 98. The creature was immune to all physical damage, so Haruka tried to make a hole for the monster from the floor above to fall through and help. The boss didn't let him, attacking immediately. Annoyed, Haruka used his staff to absorb the boss, just like he'd absorbed the darkness. He defeated it without breaking a sweat. He initially thought the staff was useless, but it had proven surprisingly helpful in certain situations. Continuing upward, they encountered a swarm of moths with a potent poison. Haruka remembered insects were attracted to light, so he created a flame, drawing them in like, well, moths to a flame. Once they were all within range, he unleashed a maximum power blast of magical energy, wiping them out. On the 96th floor, they ran into moth larvae, whose main ability was producing silk. This required some brainpower. Haruka used his material transformation to treat the floor like a carpet, easily wrapping up the larvae in their silk. Reaching the 95th floor, they had a strange feeling. How can the monster on this floor be level 100? This one was a weapons expert, making it a tough fight. Even attacking from its blind spot, Haruka couldn't land a hit. It moved in ways a human couldn't predict, and its ranged sword attacks made things difficult. It was times like these that he appreciated the value of friendship. Angelica, a little help here. Both of them powered up and charged in. With a single strike, the monster was gone. Haruka was shocked. Angelica's stats had decreased significantly, yet she felt stronger than before. At this rate, reaching the upper floors would be no problem. Meanwhile, his weaker friends were getting clobbered by the 50th floor boss. Its attacks had a wide area of effect and destructive properties. Despite their best efforts, the damage was immense. One more hit and we're all toast. It was at this moment that the boys showed their mettle. They thought, if Haruka were here, he'd definitely take charge. So, they followed his example and charged in recklessly. The girls held the line while the muscleheads gathered their energy. The class president directed the girls to distract the enemy with magic. However, the boss had 4 arms, and one of the girls was knocked down. Luckily, the otaku launched a finishing move, a piercing arrow that blinded the enemy. They cheered, celebrating their victory. But their celebration was short-lived. The labyrinth began to act strangely. Many powerful monsters were converging, a sign of something bad to come. Outside the labyrinth, a guard was on duty. He noticed a flurry of small animals fleeing in terror and looked inside. He saw the monster army on the move. Without hesitation, he ran back to the guild to report it. At first, the guildmaster didn't believe him. Such a thing was almost unheard of. But then the guard, filled with fear, shouted, "They're coming!" The guildmaster was shocked. Each monster was individually powerful, and they were moving in a horde, a direct threat to the city. The guard also mentioned that a group of students had entered the endless labyrinth earlier and hadn't returned. Mariel's premonition had come true. The guildmaster was worried about the students. He pulled out an ancient book about the labyrinth and showed it to everyone. The labyrinth was originally considered a giant living organism with numerous floors. When someone reaches the bottom floor, a hidden function activates. The monsters, having no place left to hide, emerge together, creating the current chaotic event. The solution, according to the book, is to defeat the boss on the lowest floor. After that, it will die. and the monsters will vanish along with it. The question was, who could possibly do that? Hearing this, Mariel immediately thought of Haruka. But, like the other girls, she didn't want him putting himself in danger. Unbeknownst to them, he was already wreaking havoc down there. The monster rebellion caused tremors. The guildmaster urged everyone to evacuate the civilians. This place is going to fall. We need to get them to safety. He and a few others would fight to buy time for everyone to escape. Back with Haruka, he was still goofing off. Seeing some griffins, he came up with the brilliant idea of feeding them fish, laced with paralyzing mushrooms. They ate it, collapsed, and he easily killed them. Getting through these floors is a breeze. It's not as dangerous as everyone says. In stark contrast to Haruka's relaxed adventure, his classmates, having reached the 54th floor, were being chased like dogs. However, every time they thought of Haruka, the girls were motivated to reach him as soon as possible. Ahead, a massive pack of werewolves awaited them. The sheer number was terrifying. Outside, even though the monsters hadn't arrived yet, many adventurers were already injured from the after effects of their approach. Mariel, witnessing a disaster of this scale for the first time, couldn't believe her eyes. People said they were lucky to have survived the first wave, but when the main horde arrived, it would be utter destruction. Their greatest hope now rested on the students in the labyrinth. Maybe they could defeat all the area bosses. The guildmaster thought, the only one who could do that is Haruka. Unfortunately, they had no way to inform him about how to stop the monster rebellion. The situation was dire, and everyone was busy, so the task of delivering the message fell to Mariel. She could see them looking at her. I can't do it. I've never been inside the labyrinth. I'll probably get lost and die. The guildmaster had considered this, and decided to send Ofuda with her. He knew the labyrinth better than anyone. Mariel worried about the monster attacks, but the guildmaster reassured her. We'll protect the city, no matter the cost. Though scared, Mariel couldn't stand to see so many people injured and agreed. As the Lord's daughter, she couldn't let them die. Back with Haruka, he had reached the 81st floor. This area was underwater, making it tricky to navigate. Waterspouts raged above, and predatory fish swarmed below. Thankfully, Angelica protected him. Thanking her, he learned their opponents were level 81 swordfish. This was annoying. Taking them out one by one would take forever. Swimming speed was an issue, and ranged attacks wouldn't work underwater. Wait a minute, don't they say you can preserve fish with salt? He used a spell to freeze the entire water surface, effectively flash freezing the fish. The sudden cold slowed them down considerably. He then used his packaging skill, encasing them in blocks of ice. His strategy of turning the water world into an ice world was a success. Angelica followed Haruka, unaware of a much larger boss lurking in the area. When it emerged from the water, Haruka was terrified. The monster was too big to freeze. Plus, I turned its kids into frozen fish sticks, so it's probably ticked off. Angelica reacted quickly, dodging the monster's tidal wave. Haruka wasn't so fast and got swept away. As the colossal creature turned its attention to Angelica, Haruka launched himself out of the water on a makeshift surfboard made of earth magic. Luckily, he knew how to surf. This thing is annoying. The aquatic monster tried to swallow him whole. Ironically, this provided the opening Haruka needed. He locked on and rammed his staff straight into the monster's head, killing it instantly. Angelica was surprised he could pull off such a move. Neither of them were injured, so their adventure continued. Everything was going smoothly. They were too powerful. At this rate, Haruka thought he'd conquer the entire labyrinth. On the 79th floor, he found some good equipment. A ring that brought happiness and banished misfortune. He also found a ring that cleansed calamities, another blessed treasure. After defeating another level 100 monster on the 75th floor, it dropped a soul orb, an item that granted control over life and death. Haruka was thrilled the labyrinth was dropping such interesting items. However, he already had more than enough luck. So, he gave all the loot to his new friend. I want to see someone cursed by darkness like her find happiness. Plus, the first made her wear that armor she can't take off. He initially thought about selling them, but considering how much Angelica had helped and how little she'd gained, he felt guilty and decided it was only right to give them all to her. At first, she hesitated to accept them, but he pressed them into her hands, saying, "All girls like jewelry, right?" This definitely cheered her up. The immense boost to her luck stat triggered a transformation. Haruka noticed something different about the happy skeleton, but didn't think much of it. He continued on, completely unaware that Angelica had transformed into a beautiful woman, but she was too shy to let him know. And so, they continued their journey together, overcoming countless challenges. On the 54th floor, Haruka's class had defeated all the werewolves, thanks to their teamwork. Determined to find Haruka, the class president rallied everyone, saying he was likely further ahead. She added, "Whoever finds him gets to marry him," motivating everyone. Suddenly, they heard footsteps, assuming more werewolves were coming. To their relief, it was Mariel and Ofuda. Meanwhile, Haruka was facing a lava hell. Mariel rushed over, hoping he could resolve the monster's rebellion. Instead, she found him trapped, needing to be rescued. The class president offered comfort, saying, "Everything will be all right. Haruka is very strong." Unfortunately, they didn't know what floor he was on. Does anyone know communication magic? Searching blindly like this is exhausting. Haruka was struggling in the intense heat. Thanks to his spatial awareness, he knew this floor was riddled with traps. One wrong step, and it was game over. Their stamina was a serious issue. The scorching heat was draining them both. This was probably why there were no monsters on this floor. It was too harsh. Haruka's mind started to drift, and he almost fell into the lava. Luckily, Angelica was there to support him. She insisted they rest. Continuing would only shorten their lives. Above, the class president knew the city was in grave danger and urged everyone to keep moving. They had to find Haruka quickly. Otherwise, everything would be lost. Just then, Haruka created a vent to cool off. The sudden rush of air echoed up to the floors above, and the class president heard it, along with Haruka's familiar voice. He had used a spell to create a cool breeze to recover his stamina. Both groups then heard each other calling out. He realized this was the hole he'd originally fallen through to reach the 101 scene floor. Angelica suggested he climb back up that way, but it was impossible. He asked if they had any rope. Going through each floor individually would be a pain. They replied, "No one has anything like that," adding that they were on the 54th floor. Haruka told them to wait, he'd be right up. The class president then explained about the danger to the city, asking him to defeat the final boss. Haruka was surprised. Mariel added that the guild members were reaching their limit, and terrifying monsters were approaching. He casually mentioned he'd already defeated all the other bosses, shocking everyone. The question now was, why was the monster surge still happening? That's when Haruka learned he needed to kill Angelica to end it. Sacrificing one person to save many in the city sounded noble, but it wasn't humane. He couldn't do it. Angelica had been trapped in this dark place for so long that she wanted to be killed. He apologized to everyone, admitting he hadn't actually defeated the final boss. He reassured Angelica, saying he'd find a way to save everyone. He promised to stop the monster's rebellion, asking them to trust him. The class president, without saying much, comforted Mariel. "He makes us worry sometimes, but when it comes to trustworthiness, no one compares. Haruka has always protected us, and he will this time too." Encouraged by their support, Haruka felt a surge of confidence, vowing to save everyone and prevent any further tears. The worst wave of monsters has arrived in the city. The guild members are pushing themselves to the limit, but they just can't seem to defeat them all. Everyone is exhausted. The monsters are just too overwhelming in number, not to mention the ones they left behind. The guild leader is trying to keep everyone's spirits up. They have to buy more time, no matter the cost, and wait for the other group to return. Their mission is to protect Omui City. Even the Lord's daughter risked entering the labyrinth, so they have to do something worthy as well. Hearing this, the guild members' morale boosted, and they continued to hold the line, preventing any monster from getting inside. Back with the other group, the class president urged everyone to keep moving down. This would shorten the time until they reunited with Haruka. Knowing the city's safety depended on them, he also asked Angelica to speed things up. Before the flames grew stronger on the 73-yard floor, the pair encountered reptile-type monsters, so they used ice to weaken them. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the swordswoman delivered the finishing blow. They successfully cleared the next few floors in a similar fashion. Drawing on real-world knowledge from Earth, men always came up with the best strategies, using smoke against insects and scents against wolves. The silver-armored warrior didn't disappoint Haruka. The two formed an unstoppable duo, sweeping through the labyrinth at an unprecedented speed. After defeating a group of monsters, they found themselves with a lot of rare equipment, forcing them to stop and sort through it, taking only the essentials for future use. The important thing was, they still hadn't found the pheromone ring. Angelica seemed curious about what he would do. She couldn't understand how Haruka could interpret his thoughts without him saying a word. It seemed like magic. She seemed worried about his well-being, but he was determined to keep going, as time was running out. It was a bit of a stretch, but if they made it back in time, they might be able to save more people. On the 69th floor, the environment changed. The monsters that appeared were sleep owls, which looked harmless but were actually dangerous. True to their name, these creatures had a sleep-inducing attack. Haruka, not realizing the danger, fell under their spell. Luckily, the Labyrinth Saint was completely immune to the ability, so she carried the young man onward. This also gave Haruka a chance to rest, as he was quite exhausted. Angelica, kind and compassionate, comforted Haruka, indicating that he could sleep a little longer. Meanwhile, the other group above was facing immense difficulties. The creature they were up against was a Sphinx, level 100. While it wasn't fast, it possessed unmatched physical strength. The boys, despite their best efforts, could barely scratch it. Not only was it powerful, but it also had regenerative abilities, making it nearly impossible to defeat. Both physical and magical attacks were useless. One of the guys mentioned that sphinxes in the labyrinth were riddle-giving monsters. Fighting it head-on like this would obviously yield no results. Rumors from previous adventurers suggested that the creature was practically immortal. Hearing this, the girls became disheartened. How were they supposed to get past it? After being carried by the Labyrinth Saint for 10 floors, Haruka recovered his strength. Ahead of them was a large hole, seemingly leading upwards. Using his aura sensing ability, Haruka realized his friends were in danger. The class president was hesitant to use her special ability. Everyone was desperate, unsure of what to do. In a moment of distraction, the class president was targeted. Fortunately, Haruka arrived just in time, stepping in to deal damage. Thanks to the effect of the Paradox Gauntlet he obtained on a lower floor, he was able to negate the Sphinx's immunity to both physical and magical attacks. Though the Sphinx was level 100, it was only a boss from the 57th floor. They had overcome even more formidable monsters, so the Sphinx was no match for them. Angelica then delivered the finishing blow, magically obliterating the creature. Witnessing this, the class president was overjoyed. The two exchanged loving glances. What a goofball! Although a little late, everyone was relieved to see him back. They had all been trying their best. Scolding him, she exclaimed, "What kind of trouble do you always get yourself into?" The class president, finding the night girl strange, started to ask a question. But before she could get an answer, the floor beneath them collapsed, and she plummeted downwards. Luckily, she reacted quickly, using her air-stepping ability to fly back up. This near fall gave everyone a heart attack. If she had fallen again, who knows how long it would take for them to reunite. Haruka, acting cool, said, "Don't worry, I'm on guard now. Plus, I've learned a lot of new skills. There's no way I'm falling." Just as he finished his sentence, the area beneath him also gave way. Luckily, the class president managed to grab him. She was determined, as she hadn't been able to reach him the last time. Seeing this, Haruka was happy, thinking he couldn't escape her grasp. Everyone's spirits were briefly lifted, only to be dashed by the sight of a horde of monsters approaching from outside. Judging by the situation, this was clearly the next wave. With this number, if they reached the city, it would surely fall. Everyone was worried, as they couldn't possibly stop them all at once. When asked if he had a solution, Haruka declared that he would save Omui. The key was Angelica, the ruler of the entire labyrinth. He couldn't explain where she'd come from just yet, but they needed to get outside first. Since there was a portal nearby, everyone rushed towards it. The class president was curious how he'd managed to defeat the bosses on the lower floors. He proudly explained, "Fighting them normally wouldn't have worked, of course. So I used my brain. In this world, if you know how everything works, anything is easy." Back in the city, they were surprised to find that the adventurers had managed to hold off the morning's monster wave. However, they were completely exhausted, meaning the students would have to take over. The monsters were closing in. Fighting them conventionally would take all night. This time, the wave included flying monsters, further escalating the tension. A quick count revealed millions of creatures, of all shapes and sizes. The guild leader declared that this was no longer a simple rebellion, but a full-blown catastrophe. The entire city trembled under the weight of the monstrous horde. The Lord remained with the people, bolstering their morale, confident that the adventurers would protect them. The girls couldn't imagine how Haruka could possibly win. Mariel collapsed in despair, believing their doom was imminent. The guild leader tried to rally everyone. Seeing this, he asked Angelica to use her power as the strongest. She drew her sword, plunging it into the ground, and unleashed the aura of the Labyrinth Saint. An immense power surged outwards, spreading everywhere. Though only level 1, her power was more than enough to defeat every monster in the labyrinth. Her overwhelming presence was something other monsters instinctively avoided. The technique she unleashed acted as a mass teleportation spell, returning all the monsters to their original locations within the labyrinth. Witnessing this, everyone was speechless. In mere seconds, the massive horde vanished. Haruka approached Angelica, thanking and celebrating with her. Finally, peace returned. This was what everyone had hoped for, as life in Omui was good. The class president and her friends asked Haruka what he had done, and he insisted that Angelica deserved the most credit. She blushed at the praise. The otaku, realizing she was the Labyrinth Saint, were shocked. Upon hearing this, the adventurers were surprised, having assumed she was a monster. Haruka assured them that she was good. They had journeyed together ever since the 101 scene floor. Moreover, it was thanks to her help that he had escaped the labyrinth so quickly. Everyone present trusted him, so they accepted his explanation for the time being. Speaking of the Labyrinth Saint, it was understood she was the ultimate authority. Even the Labyrinth King had to defer to her. Logically, Angelica could completely control those monsters. Haruka, already knowing this, praised his friend. Wow, you really know your stuff. Indeed, the silver-armored girl was the strongest, but also very lonely. Due to some error or another, she had been reduced to level 1, but her level didn't accurately reflect her skills. Just like him, he was only level 10. Yet he had still managed to take down that level 100 monster. Then, the group of girls asked what would become of the monsters that had disappeared. According to Haruka's calculations, they were probably taking a break right about now. After all, commands from the Labyrinth Saint were absolutely unquestionable. In short, from this point forward, Omui City wouldn't have to fear being attacked by monsters like that again. Hearing this, everyone was overjoyed, not knowing how to express their happiness. Immediately after receiving the news, the citizens inside the city all returned to their respective homes, eager to get their lives back in order. The next morning, Haruka woke up early, eager to hold an event he'd conceived while exploring the labyrinth. Since he'd obtained a large number of treasures, he decided to sell them to his classmates. When they arrived, everyone was awestruck by the mountain of rare equipment Haruka had amassed. He was selling everything at a discount, so everyone was free to choose whatever they liked. Upon hearing this, the whole group rushed forward, scrambling to grab the best items. The girls had the upper hand, while the boys tried their best, but many ended up empty-handed. Seeing the girls go into a frenzy, Haruka was intimidated and didn't dare ask for payment right away. Noticing that the otaku hadn't managed to get any equipment, he brought out even rarer items, giving one to each of them, much to their delight. This act of generosity would ensure everyone's safety on future missions. His biggest worry at the moment was Angelica's future. He feared she wouldn't be able to fit in. For now, he had to let her live with him in the city, as she'd been abandoned in the labyrinth for so long that her social skills were practically non-existent. Making friends would be very difficult for her.